Ladies and gentlemen, you're all welcome here to IFA's 58th Annual General Meeting. Again, I want to welcome our councillor here today because I think it's important that you took the time to attend our AGM, Gord. 2012 was a difficult year, both in terms of weather and income for farmers. The constant rain during the summer months hit all parts of farming, resulting in early housing of livestock, reduced thriving yields and a shortage of fodder available, all of which will lead to severe pressure on some farmers in the early part of 2013. As we all know, 2013 will be a critical year in deciding the future of family farms and our agri-food sector. The decisions made in the next 6 months on the EU budget and the CAP will set the funding and policy framework for the next 7 years to 2020. These are very difficult and complex negotiations. We are fighting for a budget worth $11 billion over the next 7 years to the Irish economy. That is why 20,000 farmers demonstrated outside Leinster House last October, the largest farmer protest seen in Dublin in over a decade. Farmers marched to deliver a clear message to the Taoiseach Enda Kenny and Minister Simon Coveney that the right outcome will underpin Ireland's prospects for growth in farming and food. However, the wrong outcome will completely undermine Food Harvest 2020 and destroy thousands of family farms. Farmers will hold the Minister and the Taoiseach directly responsible for the outcome to these negotiations. I will return to the CAP later, but firstly I want to deal with December's budget. Last summer the problems in the farming sector were plain to see. The dreadful weather had greatly increased the workload and costs on farms. Incomes were under serious pressure as input prices continued to rise and product prices fell. Throughout the year, IFA made it clear to Minister Coveney and the government that there was no scope to cut farm schemes. During the autumn, IFA drove this message home to Fine Gael TDs in every constituency. The need to retain the Suckler Cow Welfare Scheme in particular was highlighted. Michael Dowling's report confirmed the value for money that it delivers. ICBF, Board B, Tagish and the beef industry all highlighted its role in achieving our Food Harvest 2020 targets. The Minister himself had increased the growth targets for beef to 40%. However, in the budget he abolished the Suckler scheme, undermining the key pillars of our beef strategy. The Minister's decision was wrong. He is trying to defend the indefensible. For him to claim that he was given the same level of support to suckler farmers this year is just not credible after delivering such a devastating blow to the sector. Try telling that to a farmer with 70 cows who got €2,800 last year and has been offered €400 this year. By cutting funding for farm schemes, including the sheep grassland, and with further cuts to the disadvantaged areas, the Minister chose to hit the incomes of thousands of low-income dry stock farmers. The attack by the Minister for Social Protection, Joan Burton, on farm families and Farm Assist is an absolute disgrace. It means that a married farmer with 2 children on a farm income of just €300 per week will suffer a Farm Assist cut of €49 per week or €2,500 per year. These cuts by Minister Bruton discriminated against farmers and specifically targeted the most vulnerable members of the farming community at a time when they are already under huge financial pressure. I have confronted Minister Coveney over the government's unfair and savage cuts. I have told him on numerous occasions, and I will tell him here again today, this is unfinished business as far as IFA is concerned. Farmers need a minister who will fight their case, defend their interests and deliver around the cabinet table. Minister Coveney has not delivered. His words have not been backed up by action. He cannot talk up agricultural potential to contribute to economic recovery without supporting the primary producers who underpin the 300,000 jobs and $9 billion in exports from the sector. Earlier I mentioned the critical importance of the EU budget and the ongoing CAP negotiations. It is no exaggeration to say that Minister Coveney's ability to deliver the right CAP deal for Ireland will define his success or failure as Minister. The challenge for the Government begins with the critical EU summit on the 7th and 8th of February. Agreement on an EU budget with a strong CAP will give clear direction and renewed confidence in the future of Europe. It is essential that the Taoiseach Enda Kenny works with traditional supporters of CAP, such as France and Germany, to resist pressure for cuts to the budget by some member states led by Britain. IFA will continue to exert maximum pressure on politicians and officials, both here at home and in Brussels. The CAP remains a hugely important policy to Europe's 500 million citizens, providing a secure supply of high-quality food to European consumers, with guarantees on traceability and the highest environmental standards, supporting jobs and economic activity in all regions of the European Union. The Government must fight to secure a fully funded CAP for Ireland. This means annual funding of €1.25 billion for the single farm payment and €350 million for rural development. Yeah. This deal is potentially worth €11 billion, not just to agriculture, but to the Irish economy over the next 7 years, and the Government must get it right. IFA is totally opposed to flattening and regionalisation of the single farm payment, as this will cause major disruption of payments at farm level and undermine production across all sectors in all parts of the country. The single farm payment must reward work and effort and not armchair farmers who have land but produce nothing. Productive farmers are those most exposed to volatility in prices and input costs, and it is critical that these producers are protected. The Minister must secure a limit to the total loss in payments that any individual active farmer can incur by 2019. This includes any reductions resulting from greening, young farmers, national reserve, etc. The total loss must be minimised and phased in over a long time frame. Above all, it is vital that active farmers must be protected. IFA believes that using objective criteria such as labour units and minimum stocking rates can distinguish between active and inactive farmers. This means a farmer with a high single farm payment who is no longer active would see a greater reduction in their payments than one who has continued high level of productivity over the past decade. A farmer with low payments who has built up their activity since the last CAP reform would see a higher and quicker increase in their payments than one who has continued at the same level of low activity. In this way, we can limit losses to active farmers and limit gains to those who are not producing. It is essential that greening must be workable and flexible. It cannot result in extra costs or bureaucracy for farmers or take land out of production. It must be at a lower rate than 30%, and it cannot be used as a redistribution mechanism. The option of 10% coupling must be available to all member states to protect the vulnerable livestock and sheep sectors and vulnerable regions. If capping is introduced, it must take account of the number of labour units and productivity. For young farmers, IFA is proposing that the top-up payments should also be based on objective criteria such as education and training. The young farmer installation age should also be reintroduced. Farmers in the agri-industry present the best opportunities for further growth in the rural economy. Therefore, the CAP Rural Development Plan 2014-20 must put in place strong support measures for farmers. I am calling on Minister Coveney to show that the Government is serious about exchequer support for rural development measures by committing to 50% national co-financing. The establishment of a meaningful agri-environmental scheme for 60,000 farmers must be a priority, with higher payments for designated areas. The ongoing EU review of the disadvantaged area scheme must ensure that Member States are given the flexibility to protect existing areas. There must be an annual allocation of at least €250 million in order to ensure that the payments continue to make a significant contribution to farm income. Other programmes that should be contained within the future Rural Development Plan include further education and training through discussion groups, on-farm investment measures, support for producer groups, measures for carbon reduction, measures for economic development under Leader. I want to acknowledge the introduction by the Government of an AUS tree scheme worth $20 million per year. This was secured following an intensive lobbying campaign by IFA nationally and every county executive. The meeting with Taoiseach Enda Kenny in Castlebar was critical in the delivery of AUS tree. The targeted agricultural measures are an important support for ongoing farm investment. The existing scheme will need to be updated to ensure that all funding is drawn down. On capped market support funding for measures such as intervention, private storage and export refunds must be secured. Private storage must be retained as an automatic support. This is essential to smooth out the seasonal supply of butter to match it with demand. I want to firmly reject the European Parliament's proposal to deal with the dairy price collapse, penalising farmers who increase production while compensating those who reduce supply. This is not acceptable. For the past decade, IFA has successfully fought campaigns to prevent damaging WTO and Mercosur trade deals. IFA forced the Commission to recognise the need for equivalence of standards. The fight continues this year with the threat of bilateral EU deals with Canada and the US. There can be no one-sided deals where we are expected to allow significant imports in sensitive areas such as beef. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Ireland is still in the midst of a huge economic crisis. Over 200,000 jobs have been lost, and the Irish people have taken a lot of pain in 6 tough budgets. Throughout the crisis, IFA has recognised the importance of remaining within the euro and staying at the heart of Europe. Last May, IFA played a leading role in the campaign for a yes vote in the Stability Treaty. After 5 hard years of cuts and tax increases, Europe must now come to a realistic solution on Ireland's bank debt and help put our public finances on a sustainable path. The government must prioritise policies that support the productive sector to deliver growth and jobs. This means, for agriculture, providing support for farm schemes and tax reliefs for farm investment, improving our national competitiveness by reducing costs under government's control and in the regulated sectors, strengthening job creation measures and incentives to work. Overall, the public has a right to expect the elimination of waste and inefficiency. We demand real value for money across the board in the delivery of all public services. Farmers in all commodities continue to feel the relentless pressure exerted by retailers on the price paid for their products. The most exposed are in the areas of fresh produce such as liquid milk and vegetables in the pig and poultry meat sectors. Despite a commitment in the programme for government and repeated promises, the government has failed to regulate retailers. IFA is demanding immediate action on the issues from Enterprise Minister Richard Bruton. This means the introduction of a statutory code of conduct, an independent ombudsman to investigate retail abuse, as happened in the UK. Such abuses cover not just unfair trading practice such as hello money and other forced contributions, but also labelling designated to mislead consumers. IFA continues to expose misleading by retailers in the pig meat, potato and vegetable sectors. IFA's DNA traceability programme in pig meat is a world first and will provide producers and consumers with certainty over the origin of product. IFA will expose retailers, butchers and food service outlets who mislead consumers. Pig farmers have invested massively on farms to comply with EU sow housing regulations. These costs and investment must be recovered through the increased returns from the food chain. The race to the bottom by retailers has pushed our national poultry industry to the brink of disaster. Retailers have hefty margins and they must pass back 6 cents more per bird so growers can cover their costs. Producer organisations have an important role in increasing the bargaining power of farmers in the fruit and vegetable sector. EU funding is available for POs. Minister Coveney must ensure that his department actively supports existing POs and establishes new ones. Measures to encourage restructuring, farm investment and land mobility through the taxation system are critical to achieve increased efficiency on farms. I want to acknowledge Minister Noonan for taking on board IFA's proposals for capital gains tax relief on farm consolidation. I also want to welcome the support of the FBD Trust in Mockers' initiative with IFA aimed at increasing the uptake of existing land transfer and succession options. Throughout 2012, IFA led the campaign of opposition to apply an asset test to third-level education grants. I have made it clear to Minister Rory Quinn that this move would discriminate against low-income farm families and it will not be tolerated. Farming is a capital-intensive industry requiring significant levels of ongoing investment. Farmers need access to credit at reasonable costs with prompt decision-making by banks. Rising bank fees and charges are an issue for everyone. Many farmers have particular cash flow difficulty as a result of last year's disastrous weather. In the past number of months, IFA has met with the chief executives of the main Irish-based banks and have highlighted their responsibilities to extend working capital to cover increased feed and other input costs, provide flexible and affordable restructuring options to relieve pressure on income. 2012 was a tough year in the dairying sector. Farmers had to cope with bad weather and input cost increases at the same time as market volatility cut milk prices by up to 6 cents. Dairy markets and milk prices started to recover in August. With markets continuing to strengthen, all co-ops have scope to lift prices and must do so immediately. Glanbia has recently completed a major restructuring. When the original plans were put forward 2 years ago, IFA did not support them. This time, following consultation with IFA, Glanbia came forward with a well-thought-out business proposition and a more balanced deal for all Glanbia shareholders. Having taken independent advice on key details, IFA actively supported the new structure. Farmers are taking back control of milk processing and price in GII, and the co-op still retains 41% of the PLC. Dairygold also has plans for expansion. Suppliers in both societies are being asked to help fund new processing investment at the same time as they will be investing on farm to deliver extra milk. I am calling on Dairygold and Glanbia to come together and invest jointly in building scale and efficiency. Hear, hear. Other co-ops must do likewise. IFA will not tolerate farmers being asked to spend €1 more on processing capacity than is required to meet actual expansion. 18 months ago, Kerry gave a commitment to pay a leading milk price as part of a deal which brought the co-op share of the PLC below 20%. I am calling on the Kerry PLC management to resolve this issue urgently and agree a simple, transparent formula with the co-op board. On a general point, milk supply contracts being demanded by the co-ops must not include restrictive clauses that tie their suppliers into purchasing inputs. Dairy farmers must be careful not to overstretch themselves financially in growing their enterprises. Tagish has a significant responsibility to deliver high-quality support in breeding, feeding efficiency and business skills. It is essential that proper tax reliefs are in place to encourage on-farm investment and to combat the effects of price volatility in the marketplace. Throughout 2012, cattle prices varied hugely. For the first 6 months, prices hit record levels and averaged €4.15 per kilo. However, the factories then took full advantage of the bad weather to drop prices, opening up an unprecedented price gap with the UK. These price cuts came at a time when cattle supplies were at their lowest in 17 years, clearly showing the need for live exports to create competition for cattle suppliers. With the massive increase in feed costs, winter finishers are facing serious losses. Since Christmas, prices have risen by over 20 cents per kilo. With tight supplies this spring, Irish cattle prices must increase further to provide a real return to finishers. Irish farmers are entitled to the highest prices that are available across the UK and the EU. Incomes across all livestock farms remain unacceptably low. Live exports are essential for price competition and additional market outlets, particularly with increased numbers from the dairy herd. One of the best outlets for male calves from the dairy herd is the veal trade in Holland and Belgium. There is the potential this year to double live exports, with a strong trade for calves, weanlings and the reopening of the North African trade. IFA has worked to ensure that veterinary certs are in place for Libya, Egypt, Tunisia and Lebanon for the first time in 16 years. In recent weeks, we have actively targeted the reopening of the Libyan trade and have met with international shippers who have boats passed and customers ready. Lamb price pressure and the accumulated impact of government cuts to farm schemes have hit incomes in the sheep sector. While funding for sheep discussion groups is important, this should not have been at the expense of cutting the grassland payment. The producer confidence that IFA worked to build up over the past 2 years has been damaged and must be restored. As we face into 2013, IFA has made it very clear to the factories and supermarkets that farmers need at least €100 per lamb or €5 a kilo during the main selling season. Early spring lamb producers need a substantial premium over these prices. The department's attempt to impose unworkable stocking rates in commonage areas was blocked by Minister Coveney. The department's proposals for collective agreements is totally unacceptable to hill sheep farmers. There must be now realistic engagement by the department with these farmers. Heritage Minister Jimmy Deanahan's approach to designating land and SACs must always fully respect farmers' property rights. This means all environmental designations resulting in restrictions and income losses must be properly compensated. The compensation IFA negotiated for turf cutters has gone a long way to resolving that problem. IFA is disappointed with the lack of government action on flooding. All the indications are that flooding problems will get worse unless the government takes the necessary remedial action. Funding of €116 million has been secured for forestry in 2013. This will maintain premiums and a planting programme for 7,000 hectares. I would like to recognise the hard work and dedication of the late Minister for State, Shane McEntee. He was committed to his portfolio on forestry, horticulture and food safety, and he was always a strong advocate for Irish farmers. He will be sadly missed. I also want to mark the sudden passing last weekend of Paddy O'Keefe. Paddy made an immense contribution to Irish agriculture over the past half century. As editor of the Farmers Journal, the founder of FBD Insurance and chairman of the Agricultural Trust. On animal health, IFA continues to make progress in reducing costs and removing red tape. Further relaxation of brucellosis testing in 2013 will save farmers €3 million. The removal of healthy animals from BSE test will save a further €5 million. The voluntary BVD programme has been successful and it now moves into the compulsory phase. IFA has called on the Minister to provide the necessary support and incentives to ensure the success of the programme. IFA has identified important amendments to the Animal Health and Welfare Bill. Minister Coveney must take these on board and ensure farmers are not exposed to unnecessary costs and controls. Last year's bad weather also caused serious problems for many grain growers, with reduced yields and severe difficulty in harvesting grain. Some found they had oversold their crops, leaving them heavily exposed financially. IFA engaged with the trade to facilitate the rollover of contracts and other solutions. Forward selling remains a vital tool to help growers deal with price volatility, and IFA will produce a master contract in 2013. On malting barley, IFA is working with Boer Malt to expand production and create new export opportunities. Controlling input costs is essential to maximise farm incomes. IFA will continue to assist farmers by publishing real-time price information in the Farmers' Journal and on iFarm. I want to acknowledge the significant improvement by the Department of Agriculture in delivering payments on time last year. There will be no let-up in IFA's pressure for prompt payments. However, the lack of a balanced approach at some inspections is unacceptable to farmers and must be addressed. If CAP simplification is to mean anything, there must be a clear distinction between the treatment of minor infringements and intentional non-compliances. Now is the time in the CAP negotiations to put in place proper notice of inspection and tolerances. In parallel with CAP reform, Minister Coveney must introduce a new Charter of Farmers' Rights. The nitrates regulation are up for review in 2013. The review comes at a time when calendar farming was exposed as completely unworkable by last year's weather. Minister Phil Hogan and Minister Simon Coveney allowed flexibility last year and put in place a package of measures to facilitate farmers. The same flexibility and logic must be incorporated into the nitrates review, particularly on the management of soil water, green cover and phosphorus for the pig and poultry sectors. Let me be clear with the government. The retention of Ireland's nitrates derogation is essential to allow Irish agriculture reach food harvest 2020 targets. Growing our agri-food sector is the cornerstone of the government's strategy for national economic recovery. Tomorrow's IFA conference will focus on how Irish grass-based agriculture leads the world in emission-efficient food production. It is essential that the government's upcoming climate change bill does not limit the opportunities for our food sector and our national economy. During 2012, IFA negotiated market-leading arrangements for farmers on wind energy. Renewable energy can make an important contribution to the local and national economy. However, the government has failed to set viable refit tariffs for bioenergy crops and anaerobic digestion. A sector has virtually collapsed. I want to assure you that across all enterprises and issues of concern, IFA national committees and project teams will continue to work hard to deliver results for farmers in the year ahead. At a time of government cutbacks, rural dwellers will not tolerate being treated as second-class citizens in respect of rural services, such as local road maintenance, rural security, local schools and postal services. Minister Alan Shatter appears to have no interest in combating rural crime. In fact, he has discriminated against rural Ireland in the allocation of Garda resources. Rural communities are prepared to play their part in security initiatives. The provision of high-quality broadband is critical for balanced regional development. As we start 2013, I'm urging all farmers to keep farm safety at the top of their work agenda. Our Farm Family Committee will continue to be extremely active in highlighting the farm safety message. IFA would not exist without the support of our 88,000 members across our 945 branches. I greatly appreciate the work of our 4,000 voluntary officers at branch, county and national level who give their time to improve the incomes and conditions of farm families. We have tremendous support from our professional staff in Dublin, Brussels and in our regional offices. I would like to thank you all for your efforts and hard work. 2013 will be a critical year in Irish agriculture. This year our priorities are securing a positive outcome from the EU budget and the CAP negotiations, securing government support for vital farm schemes and maximising commodity prices for producers in every sector. I want to emphasise to you here today, the IFA will spare no effort in our determination to protect and defend the interests of all Irish farmers. Agriculture remains a key sector in the Irish economy, and growth in agriculture is essential for our economic recovery. I would like to thank you for your support and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.